As the college football season comes to an end, you're probably getting a little bored with college football 25, which is why in today's video, I'm going to be giving you 10 unique teams that you should use in Dynasty to spice up the game and give you something to play while there's no football in real life. So with that being said, let's get straight into it. The first one is Syracuse. As you can see, their uniforms are very good, and their stadium is also a dome, something you don't see a lot of in college football. This is a very unique team, and you're in the ACC, so you're not in a super competitive league. So taking control of Syracuse and leading them to a national title or even a playoff appearance would be very good for the program, and you can just build from there. You're in New York, so the recruiting is pretty good up there. You get people from Ohio, maybe some from Virginia and stuff like that, but it will be somewhat of a struggle to get some of the good guys from Florida and California. But so this one I would say is about an 8 out of 10 on the difficulty ranking, because you do have some starting capital or however you want to put it, but you do have to put in a lot of work, and it will probably take a couple years to get them on the right track and going more and more towards winning seasons and winning stuff like the ACC championship. USF is the next team on this list, and it's a little bit interesting because usually when I bring up group of 5 teams, I'm talking about the bad ones, and they will be a little bit later on this list. But in terms of USF, they have a good starting ground. They're already winning games. They're getting close to taking the AAC championship home, so you can make that final push, and they do have some good rivalries. I mean, don't put them down just because they're group of 5 or whatever. They play UCF. It's a crazy rivalry. They got a lot of stuff going on. They have nice uniforms if that's something you care about, and you can also schedule some out of conference. They played Alabama this year. You can do stuff like that, and make it a challenge for you to show that you're capable of beating the Power 4 schools and other stuff like that. So with that being said, this is a great team to use if you're looking for a decently challenged but also a good one where you're gonna get a lot of wins. USF is a good choice. Kansas is the next team on this list, and in real life they have been very hit or miss. They went on that kind of streaky run. They lost a lot of games they should have. So taking control of Kansas, who is loaded with talent right now, could be an easy job to just get them consistent. If you can become a coach and get them to go 10-2 and 11-1, you're looking at maybe a playoff berth, maybe a good bowl, some good recruiting coming out of Kansas, Texas, that whole area. So you have all the things at your disposal to make a good program out of it. You just have to take control of Kansas. They play in the Big 12, so you have some good games. They're not super strong like the SEC or Big 10, but the Big 12 is still a Power 4 conference, so winning it is not an easy thing to do. So taking control of Kansas and winning the Big 12 championship can do wonders for it and propel it up to a powerhouse school. They're already a powerhouse in basketball, so it's your opportunity to make them a powerhouse in football as well. So this is a very fun rebuild to do. I've mentioned it before in videos from the summer, so looking at it now, I'd still say this is a great one to rebuild if you haven't done it yet. Michigan State is a very interesting team to use in a dynasty because of the difficulty, but also the chances. If you take over in college football 25, you have Aiden Childs, who is a sophomore quarterback and a player that you can develop or play as if you like to do dynasty that way, and make him a really good quarterback, upgrade him how you want and make sure he develops into a good player. But you have just all the opportunities. I mentioned this a lot in the Power 4 conferences. You can beat Ohio State and Michigan if you become good enough, and that's what you have to have. That's what the group of 5 teams don't have unless you go out of conference. But these teams like Michigan State, they're bad. They've been bad for like a decade, maybe less than a decade, but for the last years anyway, they have been horrible, and they need a new coach to come in there and sharpen the program up and get recruits that are being stolen by teams like Ohio State and Penn State and other good Midwestern schools. So they have the opportunity, they have good uniforms, they have a good fan base, you have the stadium pulse, stuff like that, but they're just in a bad place right now, and a good manager could be the difference between a playoff spot and being 2-10. So you saw what happened to Indiana in real life. You could do that the same thing with Michigan State. Up next is Kennesaw State, and it's probably not a surprise to a lot of you guys. You see this on about every single dynasty list, and it's going to make this one today just because of the opportunity. Kennesaw State was probably the worst team in college football, maybe better than Kent State. It's hard to judge, but if you want a very hard rebuild, Kennesaw State is right there. EA talked about in the summer how it'd be very hard. I don't know how true that actually is, but it's definitely a lot harder to rebuild Kennesaw State than it would be like Michigan State that I just went over. So I don't know, Kennesaw State, they're like 60 overall. They get mentioned in every single video just because of how good they are to rebuild and how fun it is to do that grind. So if you haven't already, once again, I highly recommend you just try it out. At least you don't need to, win the national championship, because that would take too many hours, but you can at least try and just see what happens with doing this. So I think Kennesaw State would be very fun to rebuild. On this list, I wanted to include a MAC school, and obviously the easy choice would have put Kent State on there, but Kennesaw State last time basically filled that role of the horrible team, in college football. So Bowling Green, I think, is a very interesting team to rebuild. They're in the MAC, so you're not going to be playing against top tier opponents, obviously, but they're kind of in that middle ground where they're decent. They get decent recruits. They went 7-5 this year, so not great, not horrible. They're making bowl games, but if you can get a team to rule the MAC, that'll put you in a great position to get jobs from other schools and stuff like that. So taking a job at Bowling Green, I kind of picked them arbitrarily, but I did want to pick a middle ground school once again, so that's why I went with Bowling Green. So I think it'd be fun to rebuild this team and try to get them on the map a little bit. If you watched my videos from about May, then you know Hawaii has been one of my teams that I think would be very fun to rebuild. I've said it multiple times in the multiple videos I've made about this topic, but I just keep saying them because of simple reasons. I mean, Hawaii's a cool place to be. I mean, if you like to be immersed, then thinking I'm playing in Hawaii is a good thing. But they're also in the Mountain West, so that's not a very hard conference at all. You're playing maybe, Boise State, stuff like that. Those are some of the hard teams, but you don't really have to schedule those. If you play some of the easier teams, you could easily take hold of this program. Hawaii has good jerseys. They're, green. Their mascot is the Rainbow Warrior, so I think this team is just kind of a cool one to do if you want a middle ground team that's in, the group of 5 and take them somewhere, but not absolutely horrible. I have Washington State next on this list because they are still in the Pac-12, and although it is expanding, which I basically just found out when I was searching this video up, I did not know the Pac-12 is expanding, but they're getting 5 more teams in 2026. Anyway, you're only with Oregon State, so when you play that game, that's going to be a crazy game because it is basically the conference championship. You only have 2 in the Pac-12, so it's 1 versus 1. It doesn't matter your records outside of that, but on top of that, I talk about it with Notre Dame. You get to choose 11 out of your 12 games, which I think is just super unique, and it allows for you to build exactly the type of schedule you want, which I just think is super fun to do in a video game setting where you can choose your difficulty basically just by choosing who you play. If you want to be like Indiana and play a bunch of nobodies for 11 weeks straight and then play, Oregon State, who isn't very good anyway, then you can go 12-0 and, make it to the playoff maybe if you have 12 teams and the committee likes you or whatever. Maybe I'm just talking, but you get the point. You get to choose your whole entire schedule and choose who you get to play to make sure that you're having a fun time with whatever you want to do. If you want to play the top 11 teams, then go for it because you can find room for all of them. Next is South Carolina, and just because this team is super fun to play with, if you're someone who likes to, play all the games, be on the joysticks, this one is super fun, and part of it is because of Lenora Seller, the redshirt freshman quarterback who is coming back for about 2 more years. You can play with him, develop him, similar to, what you had with Michigan State and Aiden Childs, where you're in the SEC, so you have those big games, you have a young quarterback that you can kind of structure your offense around and just make moves in those big conferences. You don't even need to win, but if you win big games against some of the teams like, South Carolina this year, they didn't even have the best record, but they did beat some good teams in their conference, which led them to be, considered at least for the playoffs a little bit. So you can just take that one step further and get into the expanded 12-team playoff, which makes it easier for all the teams. Texas State is next and last on this list, and this one is again super interesting for just very unique reasons. First of all, you're recruiting in Texas, which you're obviously battling with like a million other colleges in D1 FBS, so that's a struggle in itself, but you do have this explosive offense. In real life, they sling it through the air. You can do the same thing in this video game, and everyone loves to do that instead of running, or at least I think people do. But anyway, I just think that Texas State could be very fun to play with. Once again, similar to South Carolina, and you do have that tough, wrinkle of recruiting. You're in the Sun Belt, but you can make it out. Can join maybe even the Mountain West. You can join the Big 12. There are going to be some spots there, so there's definitely a chance for you to expand if you are going to choose Texas State as your dynasty. But with that being said, there are 10 teams that I think you should use with the dynasty as we come to the spring, as college football ends, so that you don't become bored. So thank you so much for watching if you made it this far, and I will see you in the next one.